Welcome back to Holistic Healing Association. I'm Erin D'Arcy. I'm certified in embodied processing and clinical hypnosis. Today, we'll be discussing child abuse. When we grew up in a home that we may have experienced physical, emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse. When we may have been neglected and not had our needs met. This can cause us to struggle with our mental health, our physical health, and our emotional health. Today, we're going to be discussing how we can start to heal. And we're here to send a message of hope. I have a very special guest with me, all the way from Italy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello. Shall I introduce myself a little bit?
Yes, if you'd like.
Sure. So my name is Grazia di Giorgio, and I'm right now I'm in the south of Italy, city that's called Bari. I'm an Italian-American person, and let's see. Well, first of all, I'm a Jungian analyst. I'm a senior Jungian analyst. I'm a teaching analyst. I teach, I supervise, I train a little bit internationally. I am active in the States. I'm on the board of the C.G. Jung Institute of Colorado. I also am a somatic experiencing practitioner. I trained in Colorado mainly. So I've been a somatic experiencing practitioner since 2009, I believe. I'm also a contemplative psychotherapist. I trained first in the States because I've lived in the States until 2011. So I trained in a university in Colorado that's called the Naropa University. This is a university that was founded by a Buddhist teacher. And that was the first, and I think in a way it's the only actual officially contemplative psychotherapy program that exists that I'm aware. Maybe now Pacifica Institute is doing something along those lines. So I've been working with trauma. Well, I have my own personal experience of trauma. I did suffer early trauma. There was both a severe accident. I was burned, and then there was also sexual abuse. And I coped for most of my life. Then I was a musician. Many times creativity is a very important way that people naturally work to transform experience or to integrate, right? So I was a musician, but then eventually I went into burnout when I started to work a lot, and the pressure was a lot. So I realized I just couldn't keep going. And that's when my path into therapy really started.
Okay, thank you.
I think as is the experience of many people who experience trauma, trauma tends to happen in a galaxy, right? You have the big incidents or the big episodes, and then there are usually many other re-traumatizations or other events, right? That where our defenses don't kick in because of trauma, or we don't have even the possibility really fully to recognize what is happening as trauma, or we froze in place, or there are many reasons why that can happen.
Or we dissociate, yes.
Yes, exactly, the various, yeah. So then, for me, so a little bit all of this started to really unravel when I started to meditate. And that's when really the burnout, the sense that my creative path was not really nourishing me anymore. It was all about performance and meeting, demands, outer collective demands. and so then I dropped everything. I went on retreat I did some long retreats, and then I came to train at Naropa at this university, this contemplative university, and I trained in a track that now has changed quite a bit from what it was back then. But this track in contemplative psychotherapy merged. The orientation was really psychodynamic, but more on a Freudian, more than Jungian, and the other was the contemplative psychotherapy, meaning the wisdom of thousands of years of people who have been watching psychological experience, you know, the mind. And first of all, I think one big difference, which I think is relevant when we're talking about trauma, because in my understanding, trauma always brings a spiritual question. It opens questions of meaning. And
I agree. It's such a searching for meaning and
yes,
healing.
Yes. And healing that's on a, I mean, I would say, you know, that's perhaps already a message of hope. And I understand that this might be hard to even hear, but also I think it is important to say, because this is my experience, and please, you let me know if you agree or not, but in my experience, really trauma brings a treasure with it, you know.
Sorry, it brings what?
Brings a treasure, brings some gold, potential gold. You know, in Jungian analysis, we work a lot with the alchemical model and alchemical language, and perhaps we can say more about that later. But one important aspect, right, one central aspect of alchemical work is transmutation of the prima materia, or the coal, or often the image is that of excrements, into gold, into this philosophical gold. So what I mean to say is that when people integrate trauma, are able to integrate the experience, what we come out with is, in somatic terms, a larger, a bigger sense of aliveness. It's exactly the thing that trauma takes away, because really a traumatized brain, you know, neuroscientists tell us, is a brain that is less alive, right? That trauma robs us of this sense of aliveness. And at the same time, when trauma is integrated, there is actually a bigger aliveness, a deeper aliveness, a sense of resilience, a sense of meaning, and also a deep, again, this is the shadow of trauma, because trauma is a relational event. Typically, it does happen in relation. This is a big piece of what trauma is. So it's a wound in this relatedness, right? And a lot of the defenses that trauma triggers have to do with cutting off, right? Isolation, dissociation, you know, defenses, denial, loneliness, right? Shame, maybe we'll talk about that. So, but on the other hand, when people integrate, when people are able to do the work, and of course this is not a given, then there is a deeper sense of relatedness. People typically then will feel also interested and motivated to support other people, you know, to help, and also to recognize and be able to support. And this is also a very important part of recovery, I think. Of course, it's one of the final stages, right? If it comes in too soon, sometimes it's a way to bypass, right? I try to help other people. I need help, but I'm trying to help others. And this can also not be so helpful.
I agree. I know a number of people that have been on their healing journeys, and there's great pain. And with great pain, when we start our healing journey, and as we go through our healing journey, there can be great and deep insight and wisdom and knowledge that grow. And it can set us on a path we may have never started. Personally, I will tell you, I would never have been on this path. I would never have been doing this YouTube channel or trying to help people with trauma if I had not experienced trauma in my own life, because it was not even on my radar. And
Yeah.
I am Catholic, and I can tell you that many of the saints went searching and they suffered.
Oh, yeah.
There's many saints that have suffered and they went searching. And you can have many different beliefs. I know we have many different spiritual beliefs listening to this channel, but many of us are searching for purpose and meaning. And part of that could be because we have experienced pain.
Yes. And you know, if you allow me, I was raised Catholic. I would say right now I identify more as a Buddhist, but and I know that some in the Catholic world or the Christian world or in any kind of religious view, sometimes, you know, some people are really not comfortable with talking symbolically about the myths or the images or the experiences. But and this could be another conversation. I do feel that it's really important, and to talk about something symbolically does not mean to deny its concrete reality. So symbolically, I think this is really important. Like you mentioned, the saints suffering, right? Martyrdom is a big piece of the path of many souls that came to enlightenment or to union with the divine. And I think in this sense also symbolically what is conveyed here, and also very practically, is this sense that suffering is a forge, that somehow, right? I mean, even in the Catholics worship a crucified God, right? So
Yes.
one way to say that is to say that this guy, what they told me many times, that he suffered so that I don't have to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
One view. Another way to say is that here we see what it means, right? Because if if we feel close to a God who is crucified for us, it also means that this is an example of how to embrace suffering, how to encounter suffering, right? And again, from a Buddhist point of view, right, the first noble truth, the first teaching is the teaching that suffering comes with life. I also, you know, that we are born.
To be human is to suffer. To be human is to suffer.
Yes.
It's
And
part of life.
it's part of being incarnated, you know. And I think also that's another thing that trauma, I think, reveals is you know, I think a big problem and a big obstacle also in working with trauma is that sense, you know, ego works to separate. And also what culturally we are taught is this sense that we get the good and whatever is bad, you know, we try to avoid it, right? This sense that we deal with the experience accepting certain things and other things considering them negative, right? And this is problematic. We cannot do it all the time because we never know. Sometimes something that feels really good might not be really good later, might not reveal, you know, think of addiction or, for example, right? These are big examples. But something that might feel good, or we may think, oh, this is wonderful that this is happening, then it might turn out not to be so. Or equally, sometimes something that feels bad or dangerous, you know, sometimes is not, it actually turns out to be a blessing. And of course,
Exactly.
this is, I think this is true somatically, for example, right? This possibility to, I would say one of the things that happens in somatic processing, right, is this possibility for the cortex to reorient to interoceptive signals, right? To something where I check with the body, I feel tension. Oh my gosh, I have to send it away, or there is something in there that's disturbing, and we try to avoid it. We try to cope with that.
Yes.
And then when we can open up, right? When we can open up to it, and this is a lot what somatic experiencing is, right? That we really discover label these things that we have labeled in a certain way, and so we actually stop, then they open up, they become defenses, they become inside, like you were saying earlier, or they just can move, and then there is space or some more vitality that's left behind, but there is something around it, right? Of course, this is very different from being re-traumatized, of course.
Yes,
I'm not talking
exactly. It's going through the pain. And I believe that's what Buddhists believe is it's going through the pain. It doesn't mean feeling it all at once. Through somatic therapy, it's like turning on the tap a little bit at a time. But that Buddhists believe that, do they not?
Yes, well,
Yes.
I mean, the idea, right? I mean, we can go into it, and of course, I'm not a Buddhist teacher, but suffering is the beginning of the path. So
Okay.
they say that suffering is the foot of meditation. If we don't have, also Jung, I jump to the analytic model also, you know, Carl Jung also said that unconscious suffering is useless. It's not transformative, but conscious suffering, which I think is also a way to translate this sense of going through the pain, right? Because to be conscious, we don't have to go look for it, right? We don't have to go look for the pain, but also we don't have to run away from it, right?
Because when we push down the pain, that's when we can get different addictions, we can have mental health struggles, it can lead to chronic health problems. So it's important that we feel all our emotions. And then when we push down the pain, it can cause us to become emotionally numb. And that also prevents us from feeling joy and peace. And as a Catholic, with Christ on the cross, I've studied catechism, and from my understanding, it's not that we won't, Christ is on the cross. Yes, he's suffering, so we don't have to spiritually in our eternal life. But in this life, we are called also to pick up our own cross. And that looks differently for everyone. Yes. And to carry it. And that doesn't mean pick up our trauma and carry it. That does not mean that. And that message may mean different to everyone. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree with what you're saying. And I guess if we want to speak about it in religious terms, for someone who has already faith, because sometimes, again, the experience of trauma can really interfere, right? It can leave us feeling so disconnected from the sacredness of the world, our own sacredness, right? This is what trauma does. But what I mean to say is that somehow the possibility to at least consider that this suffering has an intelligence, right? Or if we want to talk in religious terms, to be aware of the presence of the divine, right, in suffering is very transformative. Sometimes we have it to begin, and then it's much, you know, things are much. This is a big asset when that sense of faith, of understand, you know, but faith in life and whatever we encounter, a sense that there is some intelligence at work, right, is very helpful. On the other hand, I would say, oftentimes in my experience also as a clinician, people don't come with that to the work, but when the work works, they usually live with that sense, because this is what we learn. We discover that something transforms at our body, right? There is a somatic intelligence that actually, when we can allow it to work and help it, support it, will heal us, transform us in ways that we could not ever imagine, right? And there is
exactly. We don't even see it, but there's so much transformation. Like, it's huge.
Yes. And coming back a little bit to what I started saying about the contemplative approach. So there were these people for thousands of years studying the experience of mind, and this is very different, I would say, from the Western approach, which started off with the, mainly men studying psychopathology. So the Western psychiatry, of course, humanistic psychology changed that quite a bit, but the roots came out of studying pathology, recognizing pathology, and then how can you be normal? Because if you have pathology, then you're not normal, right? And my position is that, first of all, right, of course, this is a big thing, being normal, right? When we experience trauma. And I would say normal is actually a statistical concept. There is no such a thing as a normal living being, right? There is no such a thing.
What is normal? They haven't heard the book, The Myth of Normal.
Yeah, exactly. It's statistic. This is a statistical term that has a sense in a statistical sense, right? What most people behave a certain way. Most people experience certain things, don't experience other. Most people do. But how is that helpful? I would say also, I'm sorry because I go in many directions, but that I believe. So anyway, the point about the contemplatives, that they come from a completely opposite way. The idea is that the idea, pathology doesn't even come in the picture really. The idea is that the mind is innately enlightened, that this is part of our human makeup. The mind it goes towards enlightenment. Our minds are working towards liberation. The point is to support them. And all these teachers and practitioners, they develop this way to work with the mind, to work with what we call obstacles, right? Psychological problems are considered obstacles, and there are antidotes, there are ways to look. But the foundational aspect is this sense that this is where this is where we are going. We're working towards liberation. We are going towards happiness, which is not the happiness of I have this and I don't have that. It's a happiness that includes, right, all of experience. So that is very important, I think, that faith in the wisdom of nature, and that there is a sense that things don't happen by chance, right? That there is some value in working with our experience, that it guides us. There is a path.
There is a path. And I believe everyone is born with a purpose in life. And I believe with Eastern and Western religions, most believe that everyone is born with a purpose. And we all have meaning. And it's finding our purpose in life, finding our meaning in life, and what we're called to do. Why are we here?
Yes. Of course, this is also very important from the point of view of analytic psychology or complex psychology, Jung's approach, because, he tried to talk also psychologically, scientifically about also spiritual aspects. But anyway, a central concept in Jungian analysis is the concept of individuation, that is, of living our own, what Jung called the personal myth. So to live our story, to know why we came here, and to fulfill to realize, right, to actualize our life. So it's a psychological way to talk about what you were just describing in religious, spiritual terms.
And what is a contemplative approach to healing? How can this be beneficial to people with developmental trauma?
So again, I would go back to what I just said, right, about the fact that contemplative psychotherapy, the contemplative view and the model, of course, first of all, there is an aspect that contemplative practice, unlike a lot of Western psychology, is deeply embodied. So
I agree.
yes. So meditation, meditative practices, experiences come through the body, right? Working with breath is one aspect, for example, that is really important. Or if we take, like, for example, the mindfulness-based stress reduction of Kabat-Zinn, that is a piece of very ancient teachings, Buddhist teachings, right? Some of it is being taken out, brought in the West. This is a protocol, and it's really helpful to a lot of people, right? And they work with moving attention through the body. This is in the Buddhist tradition, this is a Vipassana practice. So I also want to say, so there's a lot to say, maybe this could be a whole other conversation, but so this is one aspect, right? The fact that you work through and with the body. There is this aspect of knowing, and also, again, the contemplative practice typically is based on experience. It's not about you have to believe something, you have an experience.
Experience, yes.
Experience. And then another aspect that I think is very important is that in contemplative practices, and I would include in that also yoga, the yogic tradition, there are so many of those practices have come into our also Western approach to trauma work, because these are really valuable tools. The contemplative tradition, the position, the posture of meditation is a neuroregulating device. It's designed, of course, it doesn't work like this for everybody because every nervous system is different. Some people sitting cross-legged can feel like they want to just like, and of course there is other things to do, but in general, when we are not really, there are no big disturbances or other things to attend to, pretty much, you know, there's a lot of pranayama, right? Breathing practices, the posture for meditation they're all designed to help balance the nervous system, to put us into what we call the window of tolerance. So there is a lot from that tradition, I believe, that really can come through.
Oh, I agree. Yes, significantly.
Yes.
There's so much.
Yes. And of course, what we also have been talking about since perhaps the beginning, the spiritual aspect, right? This sense of that there's already set up for this spiritual connection and finding it through the experience. And this is not something that Western psychology really, is designed for, right? There is a lot. I mean, now it seems like it's a huge revelation, the psycho-spiritual approach to trauma work, right, in the West. But I think
Eastern, it's not. And I believe with healing trauma, it is a mistake to leave out part of ourselves. So I believe it includes mind, body, and soul. It's all. Because if we're not healing one part and one part is hurting, it's going to impact all of us. Some way it's going to come out.
Yeah. And for two things I would add to this, one is the fact that trauma, even the root of the word trauma, comes from cut. And trauma breaks things up. So the work of recovery typically has this sense of integrating, right? So again, it's a holistic approach. It's a holistic experience. This is about the whole being healing. I also would say that my approach is that, illness is stereotypical. If I have a depression, or if an Indio in the Amazon has a depression, probably, a psychologist could recognize that there is depression. We will have probably similar ways, or a person in Germany or in Sweden depressed. You will find similar qualities. But so again, illness is stereotypical, but healing is a creative act. Healing is individual. Like the way I will heal from my depression will be probably very different from the way an Indio in the Amazon might heal from depression, or a lawyer in Sweden heal from depression. So That's very important. And it's part of that gift of trauma that calls us to meeting ourselves on a deeper level.
And how we can heal. And Gabriel Rates, he said that ancient tribes, when someone, for example, had depression or was hurting, if they came to the tribe, they would come to the tribe, and the tribe would thank them for telling them. And they would say, your hurting is our hurting. And they would say, that means that there is an imbalance in our community, and that we heal together. And they would come together, and they would heal, and they would drum, and they would dance. Whereas in Western, we self-isolate. Everything's closed, nothing's spoken about. We all live separate. We just stay busy, and we self-isolate. To me, Gabriel Mates has it right.
Absolutely.
And if we can come together and listen to his great wisdom, I'd love to see what a ripple effect that would have.
Yes, yes. And I would say that that's really objectively true, you know. We know more and more and more, we know about the ways that we are so deeply connected with other humans. Our hearts send electromagnetic signals that go out to infinity. Our hearts synchronize with other hearts around. This is a process that goes on below the threshold of consciousness for the most part. And it's true, right? And this is also something very important in the Jungian approach, this sense of the collective, how the collective and the individual are connected and working together. Because it's true, I totally agree that the fact that we separate in this way, and all the shame and the blame and all these projections around suffering and trauma are really causing a huge negative ripple effect, because people carry this unconscious suffering around.
And what's the number of children that are in deep pain from abuse? I believe it's very significant. And there are more children than people realize or like to believe. How does it impact them? And how does it impact our society long term? What needs to change in society to make sure this is not happening?
So yes, I mean, as you say that, right, I'm aware, or perhaps we are aware of the number of children that there are wars in this world. There are there are children starving to death, right, with food just not very far from them. That's just not, they're not allowing, right, these children
Yes.
to be. So there is and this is just a piece, right? So it's true. So I want to say, years ago, when I was still in my training as a somatic experiencing practitioner. So I was talking to one of my teachers who's a trainer, who's been training already at the time. He had been traveling all over the world and training in China and Africa, Europe, and so forth. And I asked him, what do you see happening on a global level in terms of the somatic situation? What are the developments? What do you see happening all over? And I was what he said was that this ability, the attachment system, and of course this is a technical expression, but what really is deteriorating globally, and it was already before COVID, you know, already years ago, this person who'd been traveling, teaching, working with people was saying something is really wrong. All these people who have suffered early abuse, neglect, whose attachment system has been wounded, they grow up, then they have children, and you know, as long as
generational, intergenerational.
becomes generational and it resonates and it amplifies. Right now we have on a global level, of course, I don't want to make, political statements, but trauma is political, and when we have on a global level, so many countries, not one, more and more with this sense that we need to, okay, this is really hard, these children are dying, but we need to think about ourselves. We have to, this sense of attachment, right, we're becoming more and more like less human, right? More
I agree.
The predator is coming up, right? And the predator is the part in our nervous system and our experience that comes up when we're not anymore in the window of tolerance, right? When our capacity for empathy, what in somatic work we refer to mainly as this.
Where is the compassion?
It shuts down, right? Because this is something that early experiences, right, are really important about we are set up for empathy, but this is something that needs to be cultivated. It's not a given. In fact, for example, I remember, I couldn't quote the study, but I can come up with information if we need it. I remember reading a study, a meta study on mass murderers, and looking for what are the commonalities, what are the traits, right? And okay, well, there is one thing, mainly they are male identified. This is one thing, but not only. The one other characteristic, so culture, also race, age, there are many variables. But the one thing that was pretty constant across the board is isolation. The fact that these people, before going to do a mass murder, they were isolated. They were withdrawn from contact with other people.
Interesting.
So, yes. And I think it speaks to the importance of having these mirror neurons activated and looking in each other's eyes and being heart to heart, right? And then there is this big question about screens, right? Because screens don't necessarily have to do it, but that level of experience can be attenuated and become, and if it's not already happening, it can just like be bypassed, right? And then we have more of other parts of the nervous system that work that are more disembodied. So that can be a problem.
And the more embodied we become, the more we become our authentic self, and more we can open our hearts, soften our hearts, understand our emotions, and connect with others. And Carl Jung's approach, what is Carl Jung's approach to understanding our dreams and nightmares?
So first of all, maybe a little, I mean, of course, this is another big topic, but Jung was a little bit younger than Freud. And of course, working with the unconscious and dreams is something that started way before Freud. I mean, it's in most of the spiritual traditions around the world, a sense of attention to dreams. Even before we started to talk psychologically, mainly there was also a sense that they are in the Bible and in the Torah, in a lot of sacred scriptures. There are dreams, right? Dreams coming from
It's
the
true.
Yes. So then there is this psychoanalytic, right? Freud writing the interpretation of dreams in 1900. So all of a sudden there is this topic that comes up. Now there's a lot to say about dream, but coming back to Jung, what he realized, and this is different from Freud, because Freud had the idea, the classical Freudian theory is that dreams are, that the unconscious is this instinctual, regressive part of the psyche, and that we have dreams so that our unfulfilled wishes can be fulfilled in dreams, so that the functioning of consciousness is not disturbed and we can continue to sleep. This is a reductive approach to dreams. From Jung's point of view instead, first of all, Jung realized that in the unconscious, that the unconscious is way more than that. That he found, he was working, while Freud was working with neurotic women and very wealthy, hysterics, quote unquote, there was a lot of trauma there, then he recanted. Jung was working more he worked in a public hospital, in a mental health hospital, and he worked with a lot of people who suffer from psychosis. And he found motifs that come up in this psychosis, in what we call delusions. He found symbols and motifs that these people had no way of knowing, but they were reported already in ancient texts, alchemical things. So this is where this idea about archetypes and the collective unconscious came up. So now, to come to how he approaches dreams, is that, first of all, again, here is a sense that the unconscious has a lot, is very different from consciousness, speaks with a completely different language, but it's in constant contact with consciousness, that the unconscious has resources that consciousness doesn't have.
Makes sense. And even in like somatic sessions, we can go into the unconscious and learn so much.
Yes.
So much comes up.
Nervous system, yeah, it's unconscious, right? Yes, absolutely. I refer to that as somatic unconscious. But so this, and also there's many stories, like, you know, the man who, the scientist who figured out the elemental table, he was worried about this problem, working on it. Then he went to sleep, he had a dream, and then in the dream the answer to the question came, and then he woke up and he figured out how to order these elements in the periodic table. There's many examples of you know, people going to sleep and answers to questions coming through dreams. In my experience, clinical as well as personal experience, you know, sometimes we have a dream, we don't even have to interpret it, and it has an effect on us. That could be either positive or negative, but they work. Another big principle that I think is really important here. So first of all, dreams have meaning.
I believe it. Now, every dream has meaning? And why do we forget some of our dreams then?
Okay, so first of all, yeah, from this point of view, all dreams invariably have meaning. We may not understand, but they always have it. The relationship is, Jung described it as complementary. That means, said it in other terms, that the dream will bring whatever is not in the conscious position. There is this balance, right? Balance is a very big principle of everything that is natural, always seeks balance, right? And so the idea is that every dream, when consciousness is based on having a position, I'm here, I'm not there, it's here, it's now, not tomorrow. This is true, that's not true, right? I'm not you, I'm me. And, you know, consciousness sometimes may not remember things, or may misunderstand, or may be distracted. But the unconscious, which is collective, is everything is together, everything is connected. In the unconscious, these things are not true. In dreams, you can dream something that happened very long time before, see the face of somebody I haven't even thought about for 30 years. Sometimes people dream things that happen later.
That happens to me. I've dreamt many times of people from elementary school. And I went to the same kids, went to school with the same kids for many years, but they will still come into my dreams. Or kids I played with ringette for many years, occasionally they still come into my dream.
Yes, because so there is this connection, and these are actually objective data. You know, we cannot say, oh, you made it up or something like this. But coming back to the fact that we forget dreams, right? This has a lot to do with that. So what we call the dream is already the product of a communication between consciousness and unconscious.
Okay.
So when the dream comes in, then there is a consciousness that picks it up. And this is an important thing, because while it's true in my experience, inevitably true, that dreams have meaning, that dreams bring in something that is escaping consciousness, and not anything, because of course, so many things are unconscious, but dreams have this balancing function. So what is missing from consciousness, what would be helpful in consciousness, what would give us a full picture, you know, or what correct a one-sided attitude, right? The consciousness is this thing. This is true. It's one thing at a time, right? Also, consciousness mainly works by recognizing. And this is an important thing when working with dreams, because I'm very aware as we are talking about this, that, you know, when there is trauma, oftentimes there are traumatic dreams.
That was my next question. How can nightmares and dreams impact people with developmental trauma?
Absolutely, yes. And in fact, right, this is something that can be really hard, because people who you know, intrusive nightmares are one of the hallmarks. Nightmares, as well as thoughts or visions, can be really a hallmark of trauma, of severe trauma. So I want to say, so this is important, and it's important to think about, to understand, and to talk about, right? Because then the tendency is to, many times people who have trauma and may have a traumatic dream, then they stop remembering dreams, or they stop dreaming. This is a way, natural way, that the psyche protects herself from these experiences. A Jungian analyst, his name is Donald Kalshed from Santa Fe. He is very famous, and he wrote a book that's called The Inner World of Trauma. He wrote other books after, but he has this really important understanding that especially when there is developmental trauma, so that means early trauma, severe trauma that cuts to the core of our sense of self, that goes really deep. So deep trauma tends to activate what he called the self-care system in the psyche. The self-care system, or also I've heard the same thing described in trauma work, as maybe you're familiar with the idea of the adaptive adolescent, that part that develops for a child who's exposed to trauma, who is in a dangerous environment. It tends to happen that a part comes up that's like this adaptive figure. It's like the version of an adult that a child can imagine. It's not really a responsible adult. But it's this part that is very categorical, very black and white, is very, it doesn't care at all about connection, only worries about survival, and for the same thing not to happen again. This part, we talk a lot about the child, the wounded child, but this part is actually very important, because the experience that the child carries is really radioactive. That is an experience of disgregation, of panic. It's intolerable. So there is this part that comes in that serves to protect the wounded child, and undermines the possibility of something different happening, undermines relationship, undermines also therapeutic relationship. It's very, again, black and white, and always tends to keep us alone, really. And the same thing we see in dreams, because when, for example, I've been abandoned, and then maybe much later in my life, I meet somebody and there is a sense of some attachment coming up. Then I may come home and then I have a dream where this person is abandoning me. Something really terrible is happening. They do that thing.
Okay.
And this is the self-care system. This is the psyche coming in and saying, that's dangerous. You don't go there. It's better, right? Because this part of us, the evolutionary part of us, did not evolve for us to be happy. Happiness is something we have to find. This part developed to help us survive. So survival and happiness are not necessarily
the same.
Yes. because then all the exploratory, the possibility, right, to have new experience, corrective experience, all of that is sacrificed for the sake of survival, right? You end up locked up, alone, and avoiding, right? Avoidance is another hallmark of trauma, that we end up avoiding situations, people, things, right?
Huge. That was part of my trauma for sure. I self-isolated.
Yes. So here is how, right, developmental trauma can impact dreams, right, and inner life in this way. Then we have these tormenting images, these tormenting energies, right, that attack us and attack any effort that we can make to change. So, of course, how you work with them is complex. It requires time, and maybe that book by Carl Shed might be interesting for people who are thinking about these kind of things or are trying to work with this experience. Because in practical experience, it's really worthwhile. You know, we used to say that trauma dreams were just repetitive, that they didn't mean anything, but it's not true. Another thing to keep in mind when working with dreams, which is really important, is that the first response to a dream tends to be the complex. In other terms, the dream is always, especially dreams that we remember, a dream is a sort of representation of something dynamic, something that is happening in the psyche. And the dynamic elements in the psyche are complexes. So there is a problem, there's something that we are working, and the dream represents that. But typically what happens is that, and I see this all the time in my work as an analyst, is that, you know, people might bring a dream, but in the dream something happened that typically has the quality of the problem, of their conscious problem, right? That I struggle to be loved, and I have a dream when I'm rejected, or someone, yes, let's say, is rejecting me or is abandoning me. So I wake up and I feel just the way I feel before I fall asleep. You know, it feels like, okay, the dream is beating me over the head with something I already know. This is not, the problem is that, again, consciousness zeroes in on the things it already knows. So
right. The unconscious, and we are living in, like, I should say about 90% at least in our unconscious.
Yes.
Every day.
Yes.
So imagine how much we're not actually reflecting or contemplating.
Yes.
And that's why dream work can be significant. And why is it so important to notice the felt sense in your dreams? What is our felt sense telling us?
So that about the felt sense. So I agree with you. Many times, you know, I have a lot of colleagues who don't do somatic work, and they might just work symbolically. But I think that actually it's really important to work with the felt sense. I find it really enriches the work. What I was hinting at, though, was also about, it's really important when dreams like this come and I'm shocked and I feel like, oh, okay, I know this is the problem. Why is this coming? To really pay attention to the details, other things that are happening in the dream that really can be really helpful to understand, right? Because there is where something about the solution or that thing that we are not seeing consciously. But again, when we have a dream and we are alone working with it, it's really, really hard to have that perspective, right?
Exactly,
So
reading another person.
yes, back to the felt sense. So that's one thing that I would say it's important. We have to be careful, because so the felt sense is always important. It's full of information, but also there is one caveat in my experience that sometimes what we feel, it's important to feel our feelings, but sometimes the feeling is the complex, you know. Sometimes it's that sometimes we have a feeling, but it's not an alive feeling. It's a sentiment. You know, it's like there is this interoceptive, because emotions, if we want to be discriminating emotions, I would say, let's say that this is really what comes from the periphery, right? These sensations that come to the center, and that we don't make them happen. They inhabit us, they move. But then there is the thoughts around these sensations, right? Oh, here I am, I'm sad, I'm alone, once again, this is what is happening. And, and then I cry and nothing happens. And this is also part of the art of therapy, right?
Yes.
Like in somatic work too, right? Sometimes we are in the trauma vortex, right? I'm talking about something and I'm choking up and it's closing. Sometimes it's really important to feel that a little bit and find, okay, that actually can find my legs, or actually I need to raise my arms and I feel like this is opening up. Sometimes sometimes that's the way, but other times the trauma vortex occupies all the space, and Levine in somatic experiencing talks about the counter vortex. So in polyvagal terms, like when the ventral sometimes is completely overwhelmed, we have to find the dorsal. So we have to be able, and this is something that is very hard to do alone, even after years of practicing, and this possibility, because sometimes the felt sense can be telling a false story too. Sometimes, not all the time. Of course, we have to always encounter it, see what is happening. But sometimes that's a place also where we can be re-traumatized if it doesn't move, or if there is nothing really shifting on a cortical level, right? I don't know if you agree with this.
Yes, no, it makes sense. Yes. I have a question for therapists.
Yes.
The archetypes and shadow work. How can therapists use this in somatic processing? Because personally, I find it can also contribute to somatic processing significantly. What advice would you have for therapists?
So I would say, I don't know about the advice, but from my point of view, archetypes and shadow work are crucial in working with trauma. Archetypes, of course, this is complex, and these are terms also that get tossed around quite a bit in different contexts with different meanings. But for example, one thing I would say, in my own training as a somatic therapist, there was a lot of talking about archetypes, archetypal postures, the sense of bringing the hands together, right? Having a sense of containment. There are archetypal postures that people find when they're working, and they have a power, they have meaning. And sometimes being aware of these positions that we take, right? The tips of the toes lifted, right? The sense of breaking or stopping. We might not even recognize that this is happening, but when we are aware, then it becomes much more powerful. So from a Jungian point of view, and he's the one who came up with the term after Plato, archetypes are innate. They are inherited also. They're not something that is up in the air, a concept. Archetypes are organizing principles that come through generations. They exist. They're not, they have meaning. They may have images and names, but they come also from the experience, from within the body. So in that sense, right, archetypal dynamics are very important, because they are the ones that also give a trajectory to a healing process.
Mm-hmm.
Also, archetypes typically, we can think of them in pairs, right? You think of the victim and the perpetrator. These are two archetypes, right? And
yes.
If I recognize that I'm in the victim archetype, I can look for the perpetrator, right?
And use the different parts.
Yes, and connect them. And when they connect, they can transform, right? Then I find a third, which is something that is not anymore about bouncing off between victim and perpetrator, right? There is some assertive, some third that comes in.
Because then the parts can even speak to each other
Yes,
and
exactly.
they can become one
Yes,
and
exactly.
whole.
Yes. And shadow work, I would say, of course, once again, shadow work is really what we do when we do somatic work, like you mentioned, right? There are aspects, dynamics, sensations, meanings, experiences that are unconscious or are fragmented, right? Our narrative is then fragmented, and then when we pay attention to these things and they can emerge, right? And then they can organize, again, following archetypal principles, right? When we talk about
Exactly.
completing defenses, right, the traumatic experience, the traumatic event interferes with our innate instinctual defenses, ways to protect ourselves, right? And in somatic work, we work to allow these defenses to complete, to come together, right? This is all archetypal. Back to shadow work. So this is what we do. Shadow is everything that is unconscious in a way. In a more restricted, circumscribed sense, shadow can also, we can also typically we refer to that not just to everything that is unconscious, but to those things that are unconscious that want to be in consciousness, that want to come in. And in Jungian terms, shadow is that which feeds evolution, again, suffering, right? Shadow. So I would say, again, this is what we do. Talking about it in terms of shadow work, I would hopefully can help to give the sense that there is worth, that
There is
this,
worth. And to love all parts of ourselves.
yes,
It's critical. It's part of
yes.
healing. It's just to love all parts of ourselves. I know I've worked with shadow work with clients and myself, and I was carrying deep, and I mean deep shame. And working with my shadow, it helped a lot. Working with parts work significantly in somatic sessions,
Yes.
learning to love all parts. And it's a process. It's a journey to love all parts of you.
And it begins with meeting them, right? It begins with,
Exactly.
because when we meet, I mean, everything that is shadow loses its positive qualities. It's regressed. It's not differentiated, right? So if I repress, if in the shadow there is this sense of being, for example, really greedy and selfish, right? When I can meet it, maybe there is something about being having an appetite for life, or being able to say, this is mine, this is right, this may be really important. It transforms once we connect. So talking about shadow work at least can give us some courage, and that's a model that looks at whatever is reviled and difficult and disgusting or negative with some interest, So again, loving is the final process. But
Yes. It's at first it's like I wouldn't even accept that part. It was I had to go through many sessions. And it's a
in
process.
yes, in
It's a
dreams,
huge process.
yes, in dreams, in the beginning of analysis, very often, people have these dreams of even people who don't have huge trauma might dream of this dark figure running after me, trying to kill me. Something is trying to catch me, the shadow, and the dream ego tries to run away. So what we try to do there, of course, we cannot say right away, you need to love this. Also, it might not be
No,
helpful.
it's like, can you
Just,
accept? Can you allow it to even speak? Allow it to
yeah.
even speak and allow it to say what it wants to say.
And can you stop and look? Because of course, right? also symbolically.
Even
Shadow,
take a glance, like it's
yeah,
baby steps. It's not all of a sudden hugging. It's, can you
exactly.
at least look at it? Can you let it speak? Can you just turn and glance at it for a second?
Or go to another room and observe from outside.
Exactly, from a distance.
Yeah.
Exactly, yes. And when we just continue to push our shadow parts down, they just become louder and louder and louder.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And of course, I want to say this is from a contemplative point of view that the ego, when the ego meets the shadow, it has to die because it cannot stay the same, right? When we meet something that we don't know, we are changed. So it makes sense symbolically, right? That in the dream, there is this sense of that this thing is trying to kill me, right? But of course, the language of dreams is that in the language of dreams, they hardly ever talk about physical death as literally as this. It's fascinating. But typically in dreams, the motif of death has to do with transformation.
Makes
And,
sense. Okay.
and
Interesting. I did not know that.
connected things, yes.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining. And if you would like to learn more about trauma, please subscribe today and check out the box below. We're happy to provide sessions for you. Both of our informations will be there, and we're here to support you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you so much for joining. It was an honor to have you.